Okay, so just tell everyone a little bit of intro about yourself, who you are, what you do, what's your vocation in life, all of that.
Yes, so my name is Claire, of course. I just graduated with a Bachelor's of Science in Biomedical Science and a pre-med concentration. So I guess the biggest thing is overall, I want to end up being an OB.
I'm so excited for you to become an OB.
Yes, I am really excited to get to that point in my life. I've got a long way to go, but just the end goal.
Yeah, it's a lot of work to get there too. And for the audience that doesn't know, Claire and I met in Students for Life's National Leaders Collective. So we met through the pro-life movement and had a great experience with that. And we're both Swifties. I love that about us.
Yes,
So
the amount of stuff we send each other about that is.
if I say anything Swift, Taylor Swift related, I will send it to Claire automatically for sure.
Me too.
And we will make it to a concert. We didn't make it to the Eras tour, but we will make it to her next.
Yes, TS12, better watch out because we will be there.
We will be there. We will be there. We're absolutely.
Yes.
Okay, so today I was thinking I had a little bit of requests, and I was thinking this would be really fun if we went down the trimesters and chopped them into three different trimesters for three different episodes. And thought that since you want to be an OB and you are just all into fetal development, that it would be really good to talk to you about all things fetal development, pro-life apologetics, if you want to go into that, and just starting off our three-part series today with the first trimester.
Yes, of course. That sounds great.
Weeks 0 or 1, I'm not exactly sure how some of the weeks are calculated. I've also heard, this is a side point, that some people say that you're technically pregnant for 10 months, not 9 months. So I know that the whole 9-month pregnancy is sort of like a misnomer, but how would you say like this works?
Based on like how OBs kind of calculate it is from obviously from your last miss period. That's kind of how they calculate your due date and everything. So I say yeah, conception. 0, 1 is kind of, I mean, you can use them interchangeably, truly,
Okay,
I would say.
gotcha. And when do you feel like a woman figures out she's pregnant? Like what week is she approximately on?
We kind of roughly see, not we, but it's commonly seen around week 6 is when they start experiencing, morning sickness, and they kind of see a little bit of weight gain and just mood change, and that's where in like week 6 is really kind of the pivotal point when it comes to symptoms. But obviously you can see them sooner, and then those who are period tracking, pregnancy or ovulation tracking, they can see it sooner because they're looking for that kind of stuff.
So looking at conception and fetal development, what would you say is important regarding the life argument about when life begins and why that's important in the life development argument, the pro-life movement?
Yeah, so I would say that, I mean, it's important because obviously, you and I have taken biology. We both believe and we both know, like, it's not just a scientific opinion, it's a scientific fact that life begins at conception. You can't really, there's no denying that. And so I think bringing that into the pro-life movement, it brings a sense of humanity to what we're talking about. And, the topic of abortion, where people try to say, oh, it's not a human, it's a parasite, and yada yada yada. They'll avoid every, they'll try to make it seem, they'll dehumanize it entirely in most conversations. And so to kind of again reach that opinion and reach that agreement that, hey, life does begin at conception, and we are simply talking about human life in the conversation. That's kind of how I would say that it's pretty important within the pro-life movement.
Yeah, I would agree. And there's all sorts of different arguments about people that believe, when life begins, whether it's, the brain waves or the heartbeat, or when the baby can feel pain, or, it seems to vary depending on the person. And what's interesting to me is what I've seen, and what I'm sure you've seen as well, is that medical advancement is making the viability earlier and earlier. And it's also finding new facts earlier and earlier. What are your thoughts on that?
I would definitely say that having viability, or the medical advancements that have made viability become earlier and earlier. I think now we have viability set to, it's like 21 to 24 weeks, somewhere around there, I want to say, where it used to be, much, much, farther along. And, even since you and I were, first born,
Yeah.
it's come a very, very long way. So I think that's seeing medical advancement go that far has been really amazing. And I think, again, it gives a good pro-life argument for us to say, hey, look, like, if, there is a complication within pregnancy and the C-section needs to happen, a C-section can happen and that baby is still going to be perfectly fine. That's kind of where I've always lied or thought about it.
So the first couple of weeks, what is happening in the fetus? The mom is just, she may not even know she's pregnant yet, but she has conceived, she has the baby, that baby is growing. What's happening? What's going on in those early stages?
So, we see the heartbeat begin within, the first 4 weeks or so. The gender is chosen, and, going into the 5 to 6 weeks, we kind of see a little bit of brainwave activity. We can't necessarily detect it, but we can definitely, we know that we've been able to see it. We kind of see some subtle movements, and then the islets are forming. It's definitely kind of what's happening in those first few weeks. And, again, weeks 5 to 6 are where the mom's going to start noticing, hey, something's not right with my body. Something's changing. Maybe not right, but something's changing.
Mm-hmm. And what are common symptoms of pregnancy that the mom might be feeling? Other than a missed period, obviously, is the biggest one that women are like, oh, something's going on. But some women have PCOS where they're already irregular and they're not really doing anything, or they're trying to get back on a schedule of regular menstrual cycles. They might not notice a missed period. So what do you think? If a woman is I don't know, if she's listening and she's already missed a period, what are the things you could keep an eye out for?
I would definitely say fatigue and morning sickness are probably the two most common things that we see or that are seen in pregnant women that don't necessarily, know that they're pregnant just yet. Those are the big indicators. Morning sickness being the top one, of course, not nausea, not necessarily feeling the greatest. And those are definitely the ones, and then they're kind of, again, like you said, missed periods, but in those terms, it's kind of different for everybody. I mean, I've seen some mothers say, oh yeah, I had a massive amount of headaches, or I started to crave certain things that maybe I hadn't before, or if they had a previous pregnancy, then they kind of were alerted by oh, I really only liked this when I was pregnant the first time. So yeah, I would say a pretty the two most universal symptoms that we see are morning sickness, or nausea, and fatigue, or just lack of energy. But again, it's a little bit different for every patient, for sure.
That makes sense. I feel like that's very true with women's health in general.
Yeah, it's definitely.
Normal, but especially with pregnancy, some women are like, oh, I had nausea in my very first trimester, but I didn't the other two. And then some people have it throughout the whole entire pregnancy, and it's so difficult to find a typical symptom tracker for women, I feel. But there definitely are telltale markers for pregnancy, I feel like, for sure.
Oh yeah, definitely. There's a few, again, common universal ones, but every pregnancy and every patient's going to look a little bit different.
You had mentioned the heartbeat, that can be detected fairly early. Why is this important to note, how early this can be detected, and where it has its place in the pro-life, apologetic scene, where people are kind of claiming that, you can't have life until you have a heartbeat?
Yes, so a heartbeat forms within the first, 4 weeks, but it's really through an ultrasound detected by, 5 or 6. But it's kind of significant when we're talking about pro-life apologetics, because, again, it's another one of those really grounding topics, or really grounding facts, that once you get to that point of, again, agreeing that it is life, people really start to see it as life. When you say, oh, well, hey, their heartbeat can be seen at 6 weeks, but it does technically form earlier on. It's just, again, it's a really kind of I wouldn't say it's a coming to Jesus, but it's it brings them to a certain aspect of reality that it can kind of be hard to achieve sometimes.
Yeah, and I believe, ultrasounds have really helped the pro-life movement more than
Absolutely.
hurt it. I know that they can used improperly. I used to work at a crisis pregnancy center, and we would, caution against the people that would kind of use the ultrasounds, the free ultrasounds, just to know how far along they were to see if they could get an abortion. And unfortunately, they're misused a lot. But I don't think that that is something that we should disregard for all ultrasounds. Some people are just against ultrasounds completely, and I don't think that's the move, especially since you can determine, you can determine like early disease and sickness early on. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I've heard it, I've heard and seen it that ultrasounds are like the window to a mother's womb, and I absolutely agree with that. And in the aspect of there are certain people that are, against ultrasounds entirely, I wouldn't, I'm also kind of on your side on that one. I wouldn't fully agree with that because they detect so much. They don't just detect heartbeat. They don't, just detect where you're at in your pregnancy. They tell us so much about the health of the fetus or, the health of the baby, of the child,
Yeah.
that you wouldn't be able to tell otherwise. And that could be very important. I mean, if a mom needs to know if her baby has, hydrocephalus or just something of the sorts, that we can kind of detect that through, maybe not hydrocephalus specifically, but there's a lot that can be seen via ultrasound, and it's also those are one of those advancements that continue to be more advanced, and again, like you said, just advance the pro-life movement in a great way.
Yeah, I love it. And I love ultrasounds, and I love being able to see them. And I think it's really cool. And you've probably seen them, the 4D ones.
Mm-hmm.
Those are really cool. Do you know how those are
Yes.
done? Because I'm really fascinated with how those work.
The 40, I don't know like the mechanics or the physics behind them specifically, but again, I know
Mm,
that they're kind of more, again, they're more on the high tech side,
mm.
and like they also those are the ones that kind of allow us to see a lot that's going on with the baby. But I'm not sure again the mechanics of it all. I know that they work pretty similarly to a regular ultrasound. They're just a little more high tech. Unfortunately, not gotten the chance to really look into that.
I was just curious. I think they're
Yeah.
really cool. I have an ultrasound episode coming out in a couple weeks. I guess it would have already actually at this point it would have already been last week's episode, but it's going to be all about how to read ultrasounds and everything. And I was geeking about the 4D ones because I just love them. They're so cool,
Yeah.
and you can see like the face structures and see which which parent the baby looks like more.
Yes, those are again. I definitely agree that they're they're worth geeking out over because again you can see so much through just a tiny little picture. It's
Yeah,
insane. It's amazing, really.
it's just so cool. I
I'll still
think
have
it's
to
so
listen to the ultrasound episode that's coming out.
It was a lot of fun. We'll have a lot of pictures. You'll have to see it on the YouTube channel because I have pictures up there and you can see different things. I have a lot of different pictures to look at, but it was really fun. It was a very fun one to do. So if anybody's listening and you've not subscribed to my YouTube channel, please do that. It's a very new YouTube
Yes.
channel. I have a whopping 4 subscribers right now at this moment. So I know I'm so famous. I'm really making it in life. I have shameless plugs now. I'm embarrassed, but it's okay.
Worth it, honestly.
I love it. It's great. It's great. I'm like, if I'm having a video go on for an episode, I might as well have it on YouTube too. I have it on Spotify, but yeah,
Yeah.
you might as well. You can see it better.
There's a personal connection.
I was like, when I was a kid, I'm like, oh, I'm not gonna be that cringy YouTube person that begs for subscribers, and now I'm like and subscribe and comment below and follow my Spotify account. And it's okay. It's all good. It's all good. The Lord humbles us. All right, I'm sorry. Getting back to the conversation. Looking at approximately weeks 5 and 6, what are kinds of things that you think we're seeing, and why do you think, like, are there anything going on okay. Looking at weeks, the next couple weeks after, like 5 and 6, maybe even 7, what's happening? What's going on with the baby? Is anything big or monumental that you think also would play into apologetics?
The biggest thing that happens within 5 weeks, 5 to 6, is brainwave activity. Again, it's not something that's fully detectable, but that's when we know it to be happening. So I think we kind of see, again, pulling this into the pro-life argument, we kind of see like, oh, is brain activity equal to life? And I mean, I'll let you kind of hone in on that a little bit, or like talk about that too. But before I give my opinion, because I
No,
could
you're
go
good.
on and on and on about that.
I was curious what your thoughts were on that because I think the consciousness argument is, even from my very seasoned friends in the pro-life movement, struggle with this one because, we have the people that want to talk about euthanasia and want to talk about, people being put on these life support machines and are they technically alive? And so they're trying to equate that to a child in the womb and saying that technically, oh, well, since we can pull someone off life support, we should be able to abort this child because technically, if we're going to make them equal, they're both not really alive. What would you say to people that want to equate and try and say that just as we pull the plug on people that don't have really hardly any brainwaves anymore, elderly people, anyone that is basically comatose, they are trying to equate that to the fetus in the womb, saying that, oh, we should be able to abort them because pull the plug in the baby, per se. What would you say to that? Do you think that is the same?
I would say, I mean, obviously, both human, but it's not the same. Because if you are looking at, an elderly or an adult, post like 25-year-old person that's on life support versus a developing human in the womb, one is healthy. Well, one is healthy. The other is unfortunately not. So that's kind of the way I look at it, is you're looking at two different humans and one is still going through development, so obviously they're not going to have they may not have the same level of brain wave or brain development, but that doesn't make them any less human comparative to this one. Now, yes, this person may still be human, and I'm not saying that they're not, also worthy of a chance to live, but just for the sake of calling them equal, I wouldn't say so, because, again, obviously, an adult human, my brain waves are going to look different than a child in the wombs. Like, that's a baby's in the wombs. That's kind of, no matter which way you look at it, but that doesn't make, just because our brain waves or our brain development is at a different stage, doesn't necessarily mean that that child in the womb is any less of a human or any less worthy of life, essentially.
I agree. And even if the child is, even if the child is sick and the child isn't like perfectly healthy, it's still developing and it's still growing. What always gets me about people that want to claim that, the child in the womb is not alive, it's like, well, it checks off one of the main criteria for life is that it's still developing and growing. It has the like inherent DNA that it needs and all of basically the instructions it needs to grow. And it's continually developing. I'm like, something that is dead does not continually develop. I just feel like that's basic science, we're scientists, we're really into that. Like,
Makes
what's next for the
sense.
baby? So it's now has brain waves, its heart is beating. We have little like eye flutters, I think possibly. You mentioned. So what's up next on the list?
So, week 7 is a pretty, minor week, but we can still see, this is where we see a lot of limb action. I would say, we see the head rotating, the legs are moving. We see babies are now able to hiccup.
Oh,
Yeah, it's actually really cute. And we kind of see the hands can now hold or touch each other, and you see the fingers overlap. The heartbeat has now peaked at about 165 to 170 per minute, which heartbeat, side note, but heartbeat is kind of really interesting in terms of gender, because some say that if your heartbeat, I think it's if your heartbeat's higher, it's a girl, lower, it's a boy. If you know
oh.
that to be like opposite, and if it's opposite, please don't come for me. This is just like what I've heard.
I've never heard that. That's so interesting.
Yeah, so they can it's like an old wives' tale kind of thing. I watch a lot of family vloggers going up. I used to do that kind of stuff.
The family vloggers.
Oh yes. But yeah, so that is definitely, we're not seeing anything like monumental happen other than just kind of the limbs are, clearly developed, and
She probably knows she's pregnant by now. Statistically, let's just say she does. Then when did she go in for her first appointment? For her her ultrasound, like sound mom wellness appointment?
I think almost as soon as you find out, you can call up your OB and they can, at this stage, or not the stage, but at the stage in ultrasound development, you can see a baby as early as like 4 weeks, if not a little bit earlier than that. It may not fully obviously look like that, but you can still detect it. So nearly as soon as the mom comes in, I don't fully know exactly like what's gonna happen at that, other than they'll likely do a wellness ultrasound. But as far as I've kind of known or seen, like another one of those things that, don't, if I'm wrong about this, don't hate me, but as far as
medical show,
yeah, as far as I've kind of seen, you can, as soon as like at 6 to 7 weeks, you can call up your OB and they'll get you an appointment as soon as possible, which sometimes, can't even happen until 12 weeks sometimes. But I know that they kind of, your appointments, I will say this, your appointments earlier on are a little bit more staggered, a little farther in between, and you start going weekly the farther you are along in your pregnancy. So when you get up to like the 30, the third trimester, 34, 35 weeks, that's when you start going weekly, because there's more risk, and we can definitely talk about that when we get to trimester 3.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Baby's a little bit bigger, and there's lots more things to observe and less guessing, I'm sure, too.
For sure.
Week 8 and 9, what's going on there?
So this is, again, another one of those, I don't want to say filler weeks, but you can kind of see the eyebrows are forming, there's hair around the mouth, urine production and release starts to begin, so we can kind of see your renal tract starting to develop, or getting to the point where it's fully developed. The joints have fully formed. At week 8, the baby kind of determines whether it's right or left-handed, which is really cool, that it's cool. Kind of been able to, you can't tell obviously at that age, but
he's just riding in the womb.
Yeah. That's kind of when at that age, it kind of is when it knows, basically. The baby knows. The fingers and toes are still kind of developing. They're still webbed. And the eyelids are fused together. They're teeny tiny, just little. You can't tell that they're, the eyelids are probably about to open pretty soon, I would say.
Yeah. Oh, I did have a question. The urine production made me think of it. I don't know if you would know this yet, but are they using their renal tract in the womb as they're getting fed from mom, like with the placenta and with the umbilical cord?
Yes. So what they, essentially from what I remember, what they're basically intaking, like the liquid or water that they're intaking, is amniotic fluid, and so that's what they're peeing right back out. That's how they use their renal tract.
That's pretty cool. Can you just explain the audience, for those that just absolutely know nothing about just female reproduction in children, what does the umbilical cord do, and what does that look like?
Kind of hard to describe what it exactly looks like. Essentially, again, it's what provides nutrients to the baby. So anything that the mom is intaking, that all those nutrients, the protein, the vitamins, all that. That's why they say, oh, you're eating for 2, or something like that. It's because everything that you intake is basically used to go to the baby, and all those nutrients, you need double of basically everything to sustain the life in the child. But to kind of describe what it looks like, grayish kind of color, literally looks like a cord. Like, I can show you, it looks like a cord.
Hence the name.
Yeah, of course, it's the name. And you can kind of see, I think you can kind of see like veins and stuff in there too, which is really cool. The umbilical cord is kind of known for doing, its main function is providing nutrients. In week 9, we see a pretty big weight increase at about 75%. So baby's definitely getting bigger. And this is when kind of see it's looks a little bit different, because the head is now kind of disproportionate. It looks a little bit larger. The baby is now aware of the thumb and can suck and move their tongue, and you can kind of see a little bit of the vocal cords, and if you look really closely, like on an ultrasound, you can see the baby yawn. which is really cool.
So what are we seeing with these last few weeks in the first trimester? I know we've mentioned like there's a lot of smaller little milestones that are happening. Not a ton is going on, but obviously, baby bump is getting a little bit bigger. We're moving into about the 11th or 12th week. What's happening with baby?
Okay. So in week 11, we see a pretty big weight increase here too at about 60%. And something really, really interesting in week 11 is that the baby's reproductive organs are now fully formed, and the gender can now be seen on an ultrasound. I'm trying to remember where we said we could determine the gender on the ultrasound before, but it was a little bit later, and now thankfully ultrasounds have definitely advanced quite a bit, and you can see them on week 11 on a good ultrasound. In week 12, we see bowel movements begin, and the taste buds are fully developed, and they're really becoming aware of their hands and their limbs and like their face and everything. And we see the hands touch the mouth up to about 50 times an hour.
Oh wow.
Week 13 is kind of like it's the final week within the first trimester. You see teeth, so it's a pretty big, hard, major tissue, and other major tissues are growing. We see the cilia are lining our airways, so that is really, really important. And this is where they kind of become aware of touch. So I think they say they can feel pain by 15, but I would say it's kind of getting a little bit earlier, and by 13 they are really becoming aware of touch and pain and all of that.
What do you think that is relevant in the pro-life movement, where people just say, they try and justify abortion because, the baby can't feel pain yet? What do you want to say to those people that are trying to justify that?
I would, kind of go back to, I'd use some apologetics, definitely, and I would go back and try to, bring them down to an agreement of life beginning at conception, because we've determined this already, but it's not just a scientific opinion, it's a scientific fact that life begins at conception. And so those that are kind of saying, hey, they can't feel pain, so why does it really matter up until this point? And, again, to those I'd be like, well, just because they can't feel pain doesn't mean that they're not a growing, developing human that deserves a chance at life.
Yeah. I think that it's almost dangerous to assume that they can't feel pain, because since we're moving that bar backwards more and more, that you're not sure, like, oh, well, I had an abortion at 14 weeks, but 15 weeks is when they feel pain. But actually turns out we figured out that it's as early as 13. So that's a little bit scary too. And obviously abortion isn't good at any point. What would you want people to know just going the first trimester, new moms? What are just some important things to do? Things to keep in mind, things that you should probably be doing. Like, let's just say you're talking to me, let's just say I'm pregnant, talking to me. What would you want me to do that first trimester?
Start your prenatals as soon as possible is probably the biggest thing. Those are going to be, supplying or making sure you're getting the right amount of nutrients and vitamins and everything that you need to support your pregnancy. And definitely just kind of follow what your body's telling you and find whatever works if you have morning sickness. Some people say, ginger cookies are good, ginger ale.
Ginger is good for nausea.
Oh yeah, definitely. So yeah, it's really, again, I've told you, for pregnancy, and every patient, every woman is a little bit different. So definitely it's really important to follow listen to what your body's telling you. If you need to lay down and rest, then lay down and rest. If, you feel like you aren't really intaking enough food, or you're a little bit hungrier, which is, again, it's natural that's going to come with pregnancy, then do that. Again, just listen to what your body is telling you, and that's probably the biggest piece of advice I could give. Yeah.
What would you say are some abnormalities that they should look out for? Like things that aren't normal, like just some red flags, like go to your doctor if you see X, Y, and Z.
Spotting, really early spotting, even if you've gone to your physician, they're going to talk to you like at that first appointment about the risk of miscarriage and everything. But if you're spotting, then definitely call your OB, or whoever, your doula, whoever is taking care of you throughout the pregnancy, and let them know. I know there's a different few causes for spotting, but it's always better to be safe than sorry. Kind of earlier on, that's really the biggest thing, because you don't really see, you can't feel the baby at this point. They're unfortunately not big enough, so you can't tell if they're, not moving as much as they normally do. But yeah, just making sure that you're all good and that you're not miscarrying or anything is probably the biggest thing within those first 13 weeks.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering too. I've heard that slight cramping, maybe not cramping, but like stretching of the feeling, like a stretching feeling of the abdomen can be normal. Is that just the uterus of making room for the fetus?
That's your kind of your abdominal muscles, I want to say. You're preparing for all that, and it's being, again, like you said, your uterus is being stretched out. There's a growing baby in there, so that's a lot of it's just muscular pain that's just going to come with pregnancy, and it's probably unfortunately going to get a little bit worse as you go on.
Is there anything you want to leave our viewers, our listeners with? You just really want them to know?
I would just say you guys can also follow me on any of my socials. They're at Claire Dorn. If you look on Grace Ann's account, you can find me. But if any listeners have any questions about just pro-life or any sort of pregnancy questions that I can attempt to answer, then yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Thank you, Claire, so much for coming on Health and Hot Topics.
Of course. Thank you, Grace Ann.